Today we are going to read the book Black Whiteness, and it's Admiral Byrd Alone in the Antarctic. So it's written by Robert Burleigh, and this is a true story. It's called Black Whiteness. And so it says, for Stuart McConnell, with many thanks, RB, that must be Robert Burleigh. And then to the Byrd Polar Research Center and the Explorers Club, many thanks. WK, that's our illustrator, Walter Lyon Crudup. Interesting. All right, here we go. I'm getting kind of chilly just thinking about this book. All right, Antarctica, March 1934. A man stands alone in the snow watching a tractor disappear over the far horizon. Wherever he turns now, he sees the flat whiteness roll on forever to meet the sky. He feels the things of the world shrink away to nothing. It is mid-afternoon, but the sun to the south is already setting. Night is coming on, pressing down with its blue-black shadow. He kneels and opens a small hatch. Below, buried like a cave in the snow, is the tiny shack where he will live for many months. He puts his foot on the first rung of the ladder and lowers himself inside. So I like how it says he sees flat whiteness roll on forever to meet the sky. What do you think they're talking about? If they're in Antarctica, what is it like in Antarctica? It's gold. So what is flat and white all the way? It's going to be that snow-covered ground. In fact, if you look at a map of Antarctica, and it shows you Antarctica, there's also parts of Antarctica that are covered with ice that never melts. So, if you were there, sometimes you wouldn't know if you were walking over land or ice because of the snow cover. So, just an interesting little fact. Admiral Richard Byrd, explorer, moves about his snug house, tidily built as a watch. With 4 strides, he can cross the room, past the bunk on a wall, a stove, shelves, hooks for clothes. So it kind of sounds like he's got a tiny house before they were popular, right? A little tiny house. He can do 4 big steps, and he's from one side of where he's staying to the other. All right. His narrow world is a dim one, too. He has only a flashlight, a lantern, and a small gas lamp. There are 3 thin windows in the roof. The ceiling is made of aluminum to reflect what little light there is. Outside the door is a kind of porch. The ladder to the hatch rests on it. Leading away are 2 long, low tunnels. It is here that he stores his tons of fuel and food. His toilet is a hole at the end of the tunnels, 35 feet away. And then, can you guys see right here? I don't know if you can tell, but the text here is like in cursive fonts, and this is more in like a text font. So this is the story. And then when we look at these, it's his journal. He says, the tunnels are dark as dungeons, but in the lantern light, they take on a breathless radiance. Icicles on the roof glisten like candelabra. The walls glow with a sharp blue nakedness. I love that image too. You know what it's like when it's dark and it's winter. It's very interesting. Just kind of a different feeling. And he's there all alone. Advanced Base is the first inland base in Antarctica. There are 8 weather instruments, and each day Byrd must record the information they give. The instruments tell the wind speed and direction. They tell the temperature. They tell the amount of moisture in the air. Scientists around the world want to know these things. But Admiral Byrd wants to know something else, too. What is it like to live so completely alone, in such intense cold and so much darkness? Can any human being endure that? Can he, Richard Byrd? He keeps a diary where at the end of each day he writes down his thoughts. Writing like this, he tells himself, is like thinking out loud. So we're going to read another entry from his journal. Says, out here in frost and darkness, as complete as that of the Ice Age, I may have time to catch up, to study, and to think. I am able to live exactly as I choose, obedient to nothing, but the laws of the wind and the night and the cold. That is the way I see it. I don't know how I would do being so isolated. I don't know if I'd be able to do that, especially with the cold. So pretty interesting just to think if you could do something like that. Because the scientist, I mean, he's taking on a big task for what he believes in. He's, going away, being all by himself. And if something happens to him, nobody's there to come and rescue him. And it's 1934. There's no cell phones. It's going to be tough to get in touch with anybody. So, you can think about all the different aspects of this story. And it is true. All right, here we go. We're going to keep going. Little America, the main base, is many miles away on the Antarctic coast. Admiral Byrd contacts the people at Little America on his radio. He can hear their voices, but he can only reply in a code of dashes and dots. The rest is most an eerily silence, except for the constant ticking of the weather machines and the ceaseless blowing of the wind. Cold, terrible cold. So you ever notice when it's really quiet, like when it's at nighttime when everyone's sleeping, that's when I hear all the crazy sounds that I don't hear during the day. And sometimes at night when it's dark, maybe those sounds kind of scare me. I can't imagine what he is doing here and just the different sounds and the wind, and that must be frightening. And it sounds like he is able to communicate, but it sounds like Morse code. So he can't even use his words to tell people what's going on with him. So we're going to look at cold, terrible cold. At negative 50 degrees Fahrenheit, a flashlight dies in his hand. At negative 55 degrees Fahrenheit, kerosene freezes. That's the gas he's using for light, and I'm sure heat, or just for his light. At negative 60 degrees Fahrenheit, rubber turns brittle and snaps. Juice bottles shatter. Canned food from the tunnel becomes hard as a rock. Outside, he hears his breath freeze as it floats away, making a sound like firecrackers. Sometimes the frozen breath hangs above his head like a small cloud. If he breathes too deeply, his lungs burn with invisible fire. Yeah, have you ever had that feeling when you breathe in and it's like, oh, it's so cold, it can affect your whole body? It was giving all these temperatures, too, of what happened. Do you know what temperature Fahrenheit is freezing? Because it's saying it's starting here at negative 50, and then it just gets colder. Freezing is actually 32 degrees Fahrenheit. So these are not temperatures that we're used to having here in Ohio at all, even when it's super cold in the winter. And we've had days off for cold for school, from school. It's never that cold. So that kind of gives you an idea too how cold it is. There's also a terrible beauty. Afternoon skies that shatter like broken goblets as tiny ice crystals fall across the face of the sun. Blood-red horizons, liquid twilights, and pale green beams called auroras that wind in great waves through the towering dark. But it is April now, and each day more light is draining away. Soon there will be no sun at all. Days and days and days of total blackness. The Antarctic night. So I know we haven't talked about this yet, but Antarctica, and I'm sure you talked about this in social studies, but Antarctica is a continent on the South Pole. So it's in the southern hemisphere. And in the southern hemisphere, those places have opposite seasons from the northern hemisphere where we live. So when we have winter, they are actually having summer. And when we have summer, they are actually having winter. So Antarctica is in the southern hemisphere, and it says that it's April. So they're going from their fall and going into their winter. So not only is he there by himself, he's there in the fall into the winter in Antarctica. All right, we're going to read his journal entry. With 2 weeks of daylight left, the sun was just a monstrous ball which could barely hoist itself free of the horizon. It would sink out of sight in the north not long after noon. I watched it go as one night watch a departing friend. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me read that again. I watched it go as one might watch a departing friend. Not used to reading cursive anymore. Did you catch where it said at the beginning with 2 weeks of daylight left? When you're at the poles, they have in their winter. So the North Pole is going to be the same winter months as us, like December, January, February, mostly, um, and until it's spring in March. Um, they get all darkness, okay, because of the way that our Earth is tilted, and we're going to see a little bit more about that in science. But in the on the South Pole, they have complete darkness in their winter months, which are our summer months, like June, July, August. So it's going to be completely dark where he's at. Patiently, he parcels out the day, checks each instrument many times, writes out and stores his reports, patches the stovepipe, observes the sky at intervals, and notes down whatever he sees. He calls his observations obs. Each afternoon he takes a long walk, but in the black whiteness of the Antarctic winter, he is never quite safe or sure. Oh my gosh, they use the title Black Whiteness. So what is black? It's the dark, right? It's the dark. And then the white is the snow. So that black whiteness of the Antarctic winter, he's never quite safe or sure. One day he walks out beyond his trail, marked by bamboo sticks, and he realizes he's lost. He panics and almost starts to run, and then calms himself and once more finds his way. Think about that. It'd be easy to get lost in with all the white surrounding, kind of like how you can get easily lost in a parking lot if you don't know where you parked. It could be the same thing here, except you don't have anybody to ask you for help, or you don't have anybody to ask for help. On another day, he stumbles over a small hole. Carefully crawling to the edge, he points his flashlight, leans, and looks down into a deep crevasse. At the surface, the crevasse was no more than 3 feet across, but a little way down, it bellied out, making a vast cave. I could see no bottom. So, looks like no big deal to jump over, but once he looked down into it, he could tell that he couldn't even see the bottom because it was so deep. So there's lots of different dangers in the Antarctic or in Antarctica than he is probably used to at home. Blizzard. Like an incoming tide, the snow rises over his ankles, above his knees, against his chest, exploding into his eyes like millions of tiny pellets. No night has ever seemed so dark. The flashlight's beam blackens. The trapdoor, weighted by the sudden snow, is stuck tight. Terrified, Byrd rips and claws at the hatch edge. You are reduced to a crawling thing on the margin of a disintegrating world. Yeah, so think about that. A whole bunch of snow blowing and all around, and he's trying to get home. The drift piles up around him, and the air comes at him in white rushes. If he tries to stand, the snow wall beats him back. He stabs at the hatch with his shovel, again and again and again. He pries open an inch, forces in his fingers, hauls it up high and higher, and moaning, tumbles inside. So that is very much an emergency. I know, like, there's been times where I'm trying to get into my house. Maybe I have to go to the bathroom, or I have an emergency. I need to get inside. And of course, I can't get my key to work. And I know how frustrating that can be. But this is a totally different situation. He doesn't get inside. That's a life or death situation. So interesting. Late May, so we're almost to their winter. And suddenly, what he had feared the most happens. Gas fumes seep into one of the tunnels. Carbon monoxide, odorless and invisible. Unknowing, Byrd walks into the tunnel and leans over the radio. He feels a strange drowsiness. His eyes flutter. His legs grow weak. He falls to his hands and knees on the icy floor, and he does not remember turning the radio off, nor crawling back toward the shack, nor butting the door open like a wounded animal. All he would ever remember was the skyrocketing pain, the violent beating of his heart, and a voice inside him saying, "I must sleep." So the fumes of the gas are in there, and that can kill you. Carbon monoxide poisoning can. So people have carbon monoxide detectors in their homes. Obviously, it doesn't have one of those. It's 1934. They didn't have that yet. But he opens the door. So, I mean, he's letting even more cold in to let those dangerous gases out, and he's sick. Only the cold was real. The numbness in his hands and feet creeping like a slow paralysis through my body. I grasped for the throat of the sleeping bag and eased in. He wakes up at last, deathly sick. With trembling hands, he lights the candle above his bed. When he stands on his quivery legs, he feels pain and nausea, intense hunger, dreadful thirst. He nibbles on a small piece of chocolate. That doesn't seem like something you would eat when you're sick, but maybe that's all he has. I don't know. He sucks on slivers of ice until his teeth rattle from the cold. The candle casts its heatless, gloomy light into the corners of the shack. Admiral Byrd crawls back into the bag and lies there, composing last letters to his loved ones in America. There is no hope, he thinks, no hope. I am going to die. So he's in the cold and he's very sick. I know when I'm really sick, I want someone to take care of me. He doesn't even have that. You know, if somebody's bringing you food or liquids to help you get better fast, or even medicine. So he is on his own and he's sleeping. And he's writing letters saying goodbye to people. That's some scary stuff there. The days pass in a blur of broken images, yet something in him fights to stay alive. He manages to light the stove. He eats a little, but his strength is gone. He does not stand. He wobbles. He does not walk. He creeps. I know what that feels like, you know, when you've been sick and then you just feel very weak. So that's interesting. Getting fuel from the tunnel is a morning's work. Climbing the ladder to go topside, he stops to rest at every rung. Outside or inside, day or night, he is cold to his very bones. Talking with little America is harder, too. He cranks the radio by hand. The room is at negative 60 degrees. Sweat pouring down my chest. So if it's negative 60, that is way beyond freezing. Sweat's pouring down his chest. You know, his body is very hot while it's very cold outside. So he is very much at risk. And so remember, Little America is that other base camp in Antarctica, but they with other people there, but they are not close to him right now. Should he stay? Should he say he is sick, that he is going to die? No, an attempt to rescue him would only doom the men. I'd given a hard and fast order not to come for me until a month after the sun returns. To the people at Little America receiving his slow, misspelled replies, no, he is not well. Noon, June 21st, the longest night of the Antarctic year. On the flip side, it is the longest day in the northern hemisphere. That's when we have the most daylight of the year. But it's the shortest day in Antarctica. Do you know when our shortest day is? It is around December 20th, 21st, depending on the year. All right. Richard Byrd sits in the snow, staring out, darkness on three sides. But in the north, there is a faint dab of crimson on the distant horizon, a thin pencil line of light, like a secret message from the now returning sun. But beyond the weather records, which he keeps up day after day, he is too weak to write, too despairing to see. In his struggle to stay alive, all else falls away. Uneaten food litters the floor. Half-empty cans are flung out on the deck. Frozen slop is dumped in the tunnels. Spare parts are scattered about like ice chunks. Books lie underneath their shelves, their upthrust pages stiff as frozen sails. Get that, like the pages of the book are frozen because it's so cold. A small mirror hangs on the wall. He gazes into it. He leans close, listens, and thinks he hears a very tiny voice. Endure, it says. Live, it says. He is laying on the ground. July is born and cold. 20 days will be colder than 60 degrees below. Yet a message from Little America. A tractor team is coming sooner than planned. Is it possible? A human face again? A living voice? Outside, the air rains with an unbelievable coldness. Ice crystals burn as they fall on his skin, cling to his eyelashes, sealing his eyes half shut. That would be really tough to deal with. Think about that, having your eyes closed like that because of the cold. My toes would turn cold and then dead. While I danced up and down to restore the circulation, my nose would freeze. By the time I attended that, my hand was frozen. Inside, nothing is left for the ice to conquer. It covers the floor, it climbs up the walls, it curves up around the vent pipe, it crawls across the ceiling. On the table in the middle of the room, a piece of meat lies unthawed. It has been there for 5 days. So the frozen meat is not able to become unfrozen because it's way beyond frozen in where he's staying, because he's in the middle of Antarctica in the winter. I can't even imagine the cold. The tractor has set out twice, and twice been forced to turn back. Yesterday it started again. It will take 2 full days to arrive. He hears this on the radio, but what he hears means less and less. He has ceased to believe it is coming. He has almost ceased to care. So cease means he doesn't believe it's actually going to happen. He's kind of on the verge of not caring for things. And think about that. He's been sick. He's been by himself. He's in this dark place. He's very cold. The way you live is completely different. So knowing that humans are going to come and rescue him or come and get him, he's in disbelief. In the gloom, he thinks of the tractor men. Will they survive? He imagines them wandering past, beeping beyond him, lost in the endless dark. He imagines them tumbling down snow hills, blinded by the white wind. With his feeble arms, he painfully pushes himself up. Yes, there is something he must do. His thoughts surge among the tunnel's rubble. For a moment, he feels new blood course through his tired veins. In his mind, he begins to make a plan. Suddenly, I had a task to do. My job would be that of a lighthouse keeper on a dangerous coast. Do you know what a lighthouse keeper does, or what a lighthouse is for? Does it light the way for ships so they don't crash into the shoreline on the coast? So he is going to make some sort of light for the people coming to get him. August 10th, a night black with threat. Byrd stands by the open hatch, hauling a T-shaped kite upward by a thin string. Around its long wire tail are wads of paper and pieces of cloth. He douses the kite's tail with gasoline and tries to light a match. A dozen matches go out in his hand. It's 12 matches, right? That he's trying to get this. He's trying to light a kite on fire so that they can see him. Or the tail of the kite. Because remember, it's super windy there. So it's not the actual kite, the tail of the kite, the things that hang down. Finally, a violent uprush of light almost blinds him. He jerks on the kite string. The kite swoops into the air, caught up on a wind gust, flapping its spidery tail. Blazing against the black, it rises and rises, skates to a height of over 100 feet. The sight of it swaying in the night sky delights him. This beacon, he knows, can be seen for miles and miles. So it's letting those people that are coming to get him see him, find him. For 5 minutes, the kite flames overhead. Byrd squints, he blinks, and peers northward. Against the backdrop of the horizon, a single fiery beam moves up and down. Afraid to believe it is true, he turns away, shuts his 2 eyes tight and waits. And then he turns and looks again. There it is, still poking at the dark. Quickly, he lights a flare and ties it to a stick. He holds the stick high, waving it wildly. The flare makes a huge blue hole in the night. The light from the tractor grows and grows. Treads crunch over the crusted snow. Horns sound and the tractor stops. 3 fur-muffled figures leap out. Byrd wants to stay calm, but his hands are shaking. He wants to cry, but he is too empty even to sob. So the people are there. People are there to get him. How exciting. What a relief. He tries to jest. Come on below, boys. I have bowls of hot soup waiting. Then, following the men down the ladder, he collapses on the porch. Many weeks pass. The men from Little America help Admiral Byrd regain his strength. They chart the weather, cook, clean, and sleep on the floor. It's going to be cold and they're sleeping on the floor. The darkness lifted from my heart, just as it presently did from the barrier. At last, the Antarctic spring arrives with a great blossoming of light. One morning, Admiral Byrd climbs up the ladder and out the hatch. He walks slowly across the snow to a small airplane waiting for him. As the plane rises into the brightening air, he looks down at the roof of his little house for the final time. So he gets to leave. But remember, he was there for a purpose, too. He was recording all kinds of information for science. Admiral Richard Byrd will return to Antarctica. He will tell the people of the world about this beautiful but harsh continent. He will also write a book about his time alone. He will talk about the cold and the fear and the courage, but most of all, he will tell about the sheer beauty and miracle of being alive. I live more simply now, he writes at the end of his book, and with more peace. That's the end of the book, but we also, we're gonna look at how we have an impact of Richard Byrd here in Columbus, Ohio, because Ohio State University actually has the Byrd Polar Research Facility. So we're gonna go ahead and check that out. I do hope that you enjoyed this story. Admiral Richard E. Byrd was born on October 25, 1888 in Winchester, Virginia. In 1912, he graduated from the United States Naval Academy. He served in the battleship fleet until he was forced into medical retirement in 1916 after he smashed his ankle. While still in the Navy, Admiral Byrd began his flying career. This continued even after he retired from the Navy. He had expeditions to Greenland in 1925. He flew a plane that claimed to have reached the North Pole. He had a transatlantic flight in 1927. And in 1928, he turned his sights to Antarctica. During the remaining years of his life, he was involved in 5 expeditions to Antarctica. He made the first ever flight over the South Pole on November 28, 1929. Byrd is credited with mapping and recording huge amounts of the geographic territory of Antarctica. Because of that information, we've been able to develop accurate maps of Antarctica. Byrd commanded Operation Deep Freeze, which established permanent Antarctic bases at McMurdo Sound, the Bay of Whales, and the South Pole in 1955. Richard Byrd contributed to the role of government in sponsoring and facilitating research in polar regions and topics. Admiral Byrd, seen here with some penguins, remained an influential figure in polar research until his death in 1957. You can visit the Byrd Polar and Climate Research Center at The Ohio State University. The facility is named after Admiral Byrd and even has an awesome statue of him when you enter. The center is recognized internationally as a leader in polar and alpine research and maintains a primary focus on the roles of cold regions in the Earth's climate system. Due to its systems approach, the center has a rich, interdisciplinary history. The center is home to the United States Polar Rock Repository. The repository is a 4,200 square foot facility with over 16,000 rock samples from Antarctica, South Africa, and South America. Here's one sample of the 16,000 that they have there. This facility catalogs all 16,000 rock samples. To store all of these rocks, they need a lot of space. They have rows and rows of these boxes that are on shelves that go from floor to ceiling. That's me in the red shirt. Look how big one row is. And there are so many more rows. These rock samples have all been used to learn more about the polar regions. The Byrd Polar and Climate Research Center doesn't just have rock samples, they also have ice samples. These large tubes are used to get those ice samples, and then they even have a freezer where they store all of the samples that are also cataloged just like those rocks. Samples of polar ice from all over the world, including Antarctica, are stored here. I got to check out some of those ice samples in that freezer. Brr! I don't know how Admiral Byrd was able to do it, but he sure taught us a lot about Antarctica and other polar regions. I hope you enjoyed this story and learning a little bit about Richard E. Byrd and our connection to him in Columbus, Ohio. I highly recommend a tour of the Byrd Polar and Climate Research Center. That's all for me. Take care. Peace.